All right. Hey YouTube, I'm Lucky, and this is your weekly vendor armor PSA. If you don't know, a variety of different vendors inside Destiny 2 offer you armor, and some of it is amazingly good, and it's just right there, easy to grab. You definitely want to go grab some of this stuff, and the reason why I like this especially is because sometimes you'll have different affinities you want to use, like for example, maybe on a certain armor piece you want to have powerful friends, but then maybe another time you want to use supercharged, right? Changing the affinities of armor pieces can be very frustrating and very consuming of your materials that you farm so much for. But with vendor armor, and if you can get good rolls with the vendor armor, you can literally have multiple pieces of the exact same piece. So you can have one for each affinity, one solar, one arc, and one void, which is why this is really, really nice and really, really cool for creating builds inside Destiny 2. You definitely want to grab this vendor armor. Before I dive in too much, I've done a little bit of additions to this video because I want to make it even easier. If you see in the top left corner there, I'm going to have the logo of which character I'm on at the time, so that way you can tell if it's Titan, Hunter, or Warlock. If you go through the video back and forth, or if you go to the tower yourself, you'll be able to know which armor piece I'm talking about and which vendor I'm talking about. And then the last thing I want to cover is that what I categorize as like S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier in terms of armor. So in my opinion, as someone that's played this game for thousands and thousands of hours, I would say that an S tier armor piece is something that's around the mid 60s with a decent stat distribution. Like for example, if you had a 65 stat roll helmet for a Titan that had 30 mobility, that would not be an S tier armor piece because you don't really want high mobility on your Titan. It doesn't tend to work as well for Titans. It doesn't give you any additional boosts to like stats or abilities or traits with Titan as much as it does for like Hunter, for example, where it gives their class ability. And then also it works against you in terms of Titan skating. You actually Titan skate slower if you have higher mobility. So that would be an armor piece that would be a mid 60s that I would not call an S tier. But for the most part, anything that's around the mid 60s with a good distribution is S tier in my opinion. Anything, and then A tier would be around the mid 50s or high 50s with a great distribution. What I would consider those A tier armor pieces. And anything below that, anything below the 50s, B tier, C tier, so on and so forth, until you get like armors that are in like the 40s, which are just terrible. Never use any armors that are in the 40s. Even if they have a great stat distribution, it's so easy to find mid 50 armors you can just grab from these vendors. But with that set aside, let's go ahead and dive right in here. First up, I'm on my Hunter, as you can see in the top left corner. And if we go to the Drifter, the first armor piece we're going to talk about is this helmet. This is a 58 stat roll with 30 recovery. This is nuts. This is very, very good helmet. Definitely grab this for your Hunter. High recovery is always the way to go. PvP and in PvE, it's very, very strong. I personally am going like a high mobility build recently in PvE because I'm trying to go invis a lot more. So I use bottom tree, tether, and so that's why I go like a high mobility build. If you see me playing in Grandmasters, you'll notice I don't have as high recovery as I used to back in the day. But in PvP, this helmet is amazing, and a 58 stat roll is definitely impressive. Next up, we're going to talk about the gauntlets that the Drifter has. These are a little bit lower. We're talking about the mid 50s, so 54. So definitely not the best type of armor piece overall, but 24 on the mobility is really, really nice. This is an armor piece that I personally would put on my Hunter if I had to go into like Grandmasters or high-end PvE activities. I would want to rock 100 mobility. Those are the builds that I put on my Hunter. And with those two out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to the next vendor for your Hunter. Next up on Hunter, if you go see ZAVALA, he actually has a chest piece that has a 62 stat overall distribution, which is pretty crazy. I mean, these vendor armors, they rarely dip into the 60s, but whenever they do, you should definitely make sure to grab them. Even if it's on a class you don't play that often, if you just went every week and grabbed the 60 plus armor stats for Titan, Hunter, Warlock, let's say you never play Warlock, for example. If you just grabbed all these armor pieces, and then whenever you did hop on your Warlock, you would be set. You would have such good stat distribution no matter what you played. PvE, PvP, it wouldn't matter. And so ZAVALA having a 62 chest piece for your Hunter is definitely impressive. Plus it has 16 mobility, which is really nice, 16 recovery, and 20 discipline. So the stat distribution is also very nice for your Hunter. A solid chest piece. Make sure to grab that one. And after you've grabbed that bad boy, let's go ahead and move on to the next vendor for your Hunter. And the next vendor we're going to be looking at is Ada1, and she has a pretty decent pair of gauntlets for your Hunter. It is a 55 stat overall with a great distribution of 19 recovery and 18 strength, so it's very, very strong for a variety of different Hunter builds. Like if you're rocking Golden Gun, definitely want to get those throwing knives back really fast. 8 intellect on this. Not a bad pair of gauntlets from Ada1. Now let's go on to the next vendor. The next vendor for your Hunter is going to be Lord SHAXX, who has an even better pair of gauntlets than Ada1's, but I just wanted to give those out there because they are pretty decent. These are actually a 58 stat roll with 18 recovery and a very impressive 26 strength. This is going to be a very, very strong roll with a little bit of resilience on them, which actually isn't too bad. Like I've mentioned many times before, you need to have 5 resilience in Crucible if you don't want to get destroyed by 120 RPMs. You actually need to have like 6 resilience if you don't want to get two-tapped by people in Empowering Rift, so keep that in mind. But this is a great role for your hunter, and make sure to grab these from Lord SHAXX. These are solid. Now let's go on to the next vendor for the hunter. The next piece of armor we're going to look at for the hunter is a pair of boots that DEVRIM has. They have 12 resilience, 12 recovery, and an extremely impressive 24 intellect. So if you're looking for that high intellect build, something like Spectral Blades often is really good for this. Golden Gun can actually be extremely good for this too inside PvP. This is definitely a solid pair of boots for your hunter that you might like. A 54 stat overall, not the best, but the distribution is pretty solid for these boots for your hunter. Now let's go to the last vendor on your hunter. And the last vendor that we're going to look at for your hunter is actually FAILSAFE, which is really cool that her armor has now been updated. Happy to see Bungie actually listening to some of the feedback that's been put out there. And she has a chest piece that has a 59 overall stat, which is definitely pretty high for these vendors. Like I mentioned before, anything in the 60s for vendors is pretty crazy. It's pretty rare to find that. And it has 28 mobility, so this is going to be absolutely great for like high-end PvE stuff. Like I said, if you're trying to get that 100 mobility build like I do, if you watch me when I'm doing Grandmasters, going invis all the time, this is amazing, and it can be very clutch for reviving your teammates. If you've been watching my live stream at all recently, you know both my teammates dying is a very stressful situation, but because I rock high mobility, I can go invis over and over and over again, dodging near enemies, and I can get my teammates revived, and I can make a terrible situation a good situation because of armor pieces like these. Now, low recovery definitely sucks on this, but high intellect as well could actually be decent for PvP if you're able to get your recovery up through other armor pieces and other methods. So that's a wrap for all of the hunter vendor armor, though. Let's go on to the Titan next. All right, and now we are on our Titan, and this week was a brutal week because all of the good armor pieces end up having pretty decent mobility on them, which is very unfortunate. So really the only even respectable piece is this 24 recovery pair of boots. But honestly, with a 51 stat roll, this is really not the best pair of boots. I would only grab this if you don't have a high recovery pair of boots already. It's always frustrating trying to find good armor for your Titan because of that mobility stat issue. Next up, we're heading over to the Warlock. All right, now that we are on our Warlock, if you go and visit DEVRIM, he actually has a pair of gauntlets that are pretty good. We have 12 resilience, 12 recovery, and 24 intellect. So got really, really high intellect. You're looking for those high intellect builds for PvP. Like I said, resilience and recovery, always very solid stats. Definitely need at least a base amount of resilience, and you always want high recovery, especially on your Warlock. You really want to have 100 recovery so that we can get those rifts back really fast. So now let's go to the last vendor on our last character, the Warlock. And the last armor piece we're going to look at for the Warlock comes from the Drifter, who has a 62 stat overall armor piece. Now, like I've said before, though, the distribution is very important when you rate armor pieces as being really good or really bad. And unfortunately, this does have really low recovery. You can make up for that recovery with other armor pieces that are really good, though, so keep that in mind. But this does have 22 resilience, so you're going to hit that 5 resilience mark really fast, 15 intellect, and 15 strength, which melees are extremely good on a variety of different Warlock classes, so keep that in mind. These are a solid pair of gauntlets from the Drifter. That's going to be a wrap for this week's vendor armor PSA, though. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Which armor pieces are you going to be chasing after the most? And what would you categorize as S-tier armor? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I definitely want to know. Make sure to subscribe with notifications on if you want to stay up to date on all things Destiny 2. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.